the influence and corruption in Dorian Gray. I will be talking about the two main influences in his life, Basil Hallward and Lord Henry. Oscar Wilde was born October 16th, 1854 in Dublin, Ireland. He moved to England to become a better playwright, and he later became a great novelist while he was in London. Plot summary. The picture of Dorian Gray is about a young man who is perfect in every way to everyone around him. People see his beauty and assume he's automatically perfect on the inside. His innocence will be his downfall because his friends will end up corrupting him and changing him and influencing him to the point of where he doesn't even recognize himself. Basil Hallward. Basil Hallward was a great painter in London at the time, and he met Dorian at a party. And when he first looked at Dorian, he knew automatically they were going to be friends. There was something about Dorian that drew him to him. And Basil at first didn't want to have anything to do with him because he knew his personality was going to be changed if he met Dorian. But they ended up talking at the party and they became instant friends. Basil was in love with Dorian's looks, and he wanted to do a complete portrait of him. So when Basil completed the portrait, that was the first step in corruption for Dorian, because he realized people only value him for his beauty and not who he is on the inside. So my first quote is, years ago, when I was a boy, you met me, flattered me, and taught me to be vain of my good looks. One day you introduced me to a friend of yours who explained the wonders of youth, and you finished that portrait of me that revealed to me the wonder of beauty. This is years after constant corruption from the people around him. He's finally confronting Basil and explaining to him that Basil was a starting point of his change. Because Basil complimented him all the time and painted him all the time and was so in love with his beauty that he was corrupted because he became vain because he was complimented constantly. And from the beginning of the book, he tells Basil, "You like your art better than your friends. I am no more to you than a green bronze figure," saying that Basil only values him because he is beautiful and because he can help Basil make wonderful art and because he is so gorgeous. Okay, Lord Henry. He met Dorian while Basil was painting his portrait. And Lord Henry automatically fell in love with Dorian because of his beauty, and they became lifelong friends. But Lord Henry would prove to be the most corruptive influence on Dorian. My first quote for Lord Henry: "To me, beauty is the wonder of wonders. It is only shallow people who do not judge by appearances." During Dorian's whole life, Lord Henry is constantly telling him he's better than everyone because he is young and beautiful. So that is the only thing Dorian believes to be true. And spending so much time around Lord Henry, he begins to corrupt the lives of those around him. When Sybil committed suicide because Dorian didn't like her acting, Dorian was only upset because she was doing something selfless, something selfish, and something that made him look like the bad guy just because she killed herself. He was upset that she killed herself and made him look like the terrible person, when in reality he thought it was her because she was a terrible actor. And he also corrupted, but with the continued influences, he corrupted those around him to the point where in society, if a young man was known to be friends with Dorian, then they soon became an outcast of society because of the way they changed from Dorian's influences on them. He slowly turned into something that was sinful. He didn't care that he was committing sin and scaring and He didn't care that he was committing crimes, and there was no right or wrong to him. Everything he did was perfect. The effect of the corruption on Dorian. The first quote, "Stop," faltered Dorian Gray. "Stop, you bewilder me. I don't know what to say. There is some answer to you, but I cannot find it. Don't speak, let me think, or rather, let me try not to think." He says this to Lord Henry when he first meets him while sitting for the painting of his portrait. Lord Henry is telling Dorian that since he is beautiful and perfect, he can do no wrong. And this bewilders Dorian because he knows at this point that there is right and wrong. You shouldn't do some things and you should do some things. And this completely confuses Dorian, and he is surprised that Lord Henry would say something to him like that. And my second quote for after, this is like years after he's been around Lord Henry, spending too much time with him. "Looking now at the evil and aging face on the canvas, and now at the fair young face that laughed back at him, the very sharpness of the contrast used to quicken his sense of pleasure. He grew more and more enamored of his own beauty, more and more interested in the corruption of his own soul. Dorian at this point realizes that he is becoming something evil and sinful, but it does not bother him, because his whole life he has been told, since he is beautiful and young, he can do nothing wrong. He is perfect in every way, so therefore his sins do not mean anything. He realizes that he's doing wrong, but to him, it's not wrong in his eyes, so he keeps on continuing to be more and more corrupt. And the people around him are getting destroyed because of it, but he does not seem to care. My conclusion. Due to the constant influence of Lord Henry and Basil Hallward, Dorian has changed into something that he himself cannot even recognize. He is shocked by the change he sees in himself, and he ends up killing Basil because Basil sees the portrait of himself that is the embodiment of his sins. And Basil is shocked, and he hates who Dorian has changed into. So Dorian forces to kill Basil. And at this point, Dorian finally starts to see his wrongs, and that they are sins, and that everything he does is not perfect. And then he slowly starts to realize that he needs to pay for his sins. And he realizes that his whole life he's been doing wrong. So he finally comes to that realization and stabs the portrait of himself and kills himself. Yes?
In your presentation, you said that Dorian, because he's young, that he can't commit anything sinful, so he's perfect in every way. Would you say that applies with young celebrities today that are doing a lot of things that are provocative and controversial?
I could say that they probably do believe that because their whole lives they're getting told celebrities are perfect and that they can do no wrong because everyone loves them and because they're great actresses, actors, singers, and they believe that because they are in the media so often that they have privileges that no one else has. So they slowly, if they're raised on acting and stuff like that, then they believe they've been in the media their whole lives. So they believe that because everyone loves them, because the country loves them, that they have certain privileges that no one can take away from them because they are celebrities. Just because everyone loves them and has their attention, because they're young and beautiful, they think they can do whatever they want. So I would say it definitely applies to today because the celebrities themselves are always acting. They act out but just because they're celebrities like Dorian doesn't give them the right to commit those crimes. So sometimes they realize what they're doing, and like many young rock stars, they end up killing themselves. Either whether because it's drug addiction or bad talk, they end up, like Dorian, ultimately creating their own demise.
Great.